My name is Amalia Mesa-Bains. I'm an artist, a curator, and a scholar. Oh, I have to say I'm a MacArthur Fellow. They like me to say that. The concepts come to me because they're metaphors of the story I'm telling. So I settled on that as the way to define the chapters of my life. I was drawn to the theories of Erik Erikson because he talked about a certain period of time when a group of young people come of age, when their group life crosses a certain threshold. In some ways, this chapter was about being too big, these giant women, this place they had to go to. And then I picked Cihuatlampa because the irony of people in my generation, and I talked about this earlier today, is that none of us had children. Because to do the work we needed to do, we had to be fully committed. I've always believed art is much more than an aesthetic practice. It is a form of being, and it's purposeful, and we lead our lives with that purpose. So Cihuatlampa was really that choice for me. Mictlan took on great meaning for the days of the dead, and our ideas about the afterlife really seemed sort of fitting for a kind of examination of who we were. And when I discovered the women who died in childbirth story, to me, it seemed to be a sort of feminist nightmare, and I wanted to fix it. And so that's how I gravitated toward the Cihuatlampa and the Cihuatliotl concept. I don't usually start with the metaphor. I start with the question that I have. Why do women have to fit in? Why do we live our lives constantly being banked in by the thoughts and ideas, often of men, who don't want to entertain the idea that we could be running the table? So I think that Cihuatlampa, Mictlan, the Mesoamerican world, has afforded Chicanos for many generations a sense not only of origin and philosophy and spirituality, but actually a sense of power. And it still resonates for people, only we know so much more now. When I began the process that I've engaged in these almost 55 years, I was within the context of the Chicano movement. And that was purposeful, and that was committed to social justice and to the education of community. So when we began, we had very defined roles, and I fell into the category of home altars and then later Day of the Dead. My mother and my grandmother had home altars. And so I already had that sense of the practice of including objects that had meaning from the family's history. I think it's very hard for people to understand now, but we made art for ourselves and our community. There was not a marketplace. We didn't have galleries that sold things. Everything you did with the commitment to giving other people inspiration, giving them strength, because we were in a very difficult time. It was around the time of the Huelga. But I started looking at what was my life, what are the things that I loved and cared about. Sometimes people ask you, why do you keep doing this work? Because it has to be done. Because we make artwork about ideas that convince people to make change. You want to create an environment that has no boundaries, or in which the edges are blurred, in which the viewer themselves gets lost looking in the mirror, remembering things. People have been saying, Amalia, in this show, you really should have some stations with Kleenex boxes because you cannot believe how many people cry. And I said, well, they're not sad. That's not why they're crying. They're crying because they're flooded with memories of their grandmother's kitchen, of their father's portrait, of someone that died that they loved. That's what memories are about. They're transportive. And we used to say that memory is the bridge between the living and the dead, between the past and the present. It's where we walk. And I began to see memory as a functional, strategic element in the making of Chicano art, because storytelling is such a big part of our lives. And so when I started thinking about it, I realized that my interventions, especially in the laboratories and libraries, may seem as though I am excavating history, but I'm doing it through memory. So the memory is more intimate, more individual, more specific, more personal. So the stories that I tell are sort of based in history, but they're always within the personal drama of people I know. And then I began to see memory, particularly around the area of grief and death, as a salvation. You know, I lost my sister 5 years ago. So I've learned through memory there is a presence of absence. And the presence of absence is so comforting. She'll never be gone from me. So that's memory in the most intimate and personal way. And then in the conceptual framework, it is the trajectory of survival. It is how we sustain ourselves. And it isn't about loitering in the past or being nostalgic. It's a strategy of defiance, a strategy of being in the world when you are not recognized.